Hey guys, in this video I want to continue just doing some more problems, a little bit more complex with graphing these reciprocal trig functions. Okay, so if you've been following along with us, remember we said that in order to graph these reciprocal trig functions, we're first going to graph the original ones before we do the reciprocal. So instead of graphing the cosecant, you should know that cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So I'm actually going to graph 2 sine of pi x, okay? And we're going to do that first, and then at the very end we're going to go ahead and reflect it or do the reciprocal trig, okay? So start off with this all the time. What's your midline? The midline is a number that's all the way by itself, okay? In this case, it's actually in the front, okay? So this is going to be your new midline, or some professors call it the vertical shift, and it's going to be positive 1, okay? And then your absolute value of A, your amplitude, is how high and how it goes from the midline, is that number that's next to the sine. You see it's a negative 2, but because it's the absolute value, we're just counting the distance, we can just put 2, because we're going to be counting 2 units up and then 2 units down. And then the period is always going to be 2 pi over B. Now B is always that number or whatever value is in front of that x. In this case it's pi. And it looks kind of weird because pi is going to simplify out, and that's okay, so you're going to end up with 2. That means by the time you get over here you should be at 2. So if I start off at 0, it go 1, 2, 3 here, and then here, here, and here's our 4th. So here you should end up at 2. So this represents the first quadrant, the second, the third, and the 4th. All right. So now what I'm gonna do is I gotta figure out these other 3 little dashes here, okay, which are my other quadrants. So I'm gonna take my period. I'm gonna divide it into 4 because it's 4 quadrants in the unit circle, and that's gonna give me 1/2. So I'm gonna be counting by 1/2, 1/2, 2 halves, and 3 halves. Okay. Lastly, I want to go ahead and do my horizontal shift. My horizontal shift is this guy here, whatever's inside the parentheses, pi x. I'm going to set it equal to 0, and I'm going to go ahead and solve. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by pi, okay? And let's see, pi divided by pi is 1, 0 divided by pi is actually 0. So this guy's not going to move anywhere left or right, it's just going to stay put, which is great. So now I'm going to go ahead and start graphing, okay? Now first thing I'm going to do is do my midline. That's going to be where I start. That's the easiest part. Positive 1's right here. So nice and easy all the way across. Try not to go too fast. Okay? And just try to talk your way through it. First is the midline. Nice. Now we start graphing. Now remember, sine starts at the midline. So right here where you drew the midline, you're going to go ahead and put the period right there. Here we go, right there. And then just figure out the pattern, or just continue the pattern. So midline, and then we go to amplitude. What's the amplitude? The amplitude is 2. So here, by the time I get to my first quadrant, you should be at the amplitude 1, 2 right there. Okay, and then you go back down to the midline, and then you go down to the amplitude. So from the midline, remember it's from the midline. So from here you're gonna go 1, 2 right there, and then you're gonna go back up to the midline. So you have this nice, beautiful sine wave right here, like this. Okay, like that. Great. And we don't have to shift it left or right just because it's 0, which is nice. Now remember, the last thing we have to do, okay, is we're going to go ahead and reflect it. A couple of things here, okay. First thing, before we do the cosecant, you see how there's a negative in the front of the 2? That means we're going to have to flip it. We're going to have to reflect it across the midline here. Do you see that negative right in front of there? Okay, that tells me I have to reflect it. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take my same function. So instead of being 2 units up, it's going to be 2 units what? Right, 2 units down. Okay, and let me go ahead and do it in red. That way we can differentiate here. And then instead of being 2 units down, it's going to be 2 units up. And these here in the center on the midline, they're just going to stay put, because after all we're doing is rotating it about. or reflecting it about this midline. So now it's going to have something, it's going to do this. Down, goes up, and then it comes down. So the red line, the red graph is my reflection. Now finally, the last thing we got to do is do this cosecant, which we're going to flip it. Okay? Well, actually not flip, but this is what we're going to go ahead and do. Remember that sine, or actually I should say cosecant, is the reciprocal of sine. So here, wherever you see these x-intercepts here per se, this guy right here, we're going to have a vertical asymptote. Okay, we're going to have a vertical asymptote. And if you don't remember why, go back to the other videos and I go over it, and that'll make much more sense. Okay, and then right here again. Okay, and there it is. So now this guy, instead of being concave up, is going to be concave down. And this guy, instead of concave down, he's going to be concave up. Alright, and there it is. These solid red lines are your cosecant. Okay, let's go ahead and graph the second one. Okay, now this one's secant. Now remember, secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So we're going to have 3 plus 2 times cosine of 3x minus pi over 2. Alright, we're going to go ahead and do that one. So what's our midline? Our midline is a number that's by itself over here, so it's going to be 3. This time's in the front. Alright, my amplitude again is 2. Okay. My period is 2 pi over whatever in front of the x. In front of the x we have a 3, so it's 2 pi over 3. That means by the time I get to completed one wave, I'm going to be at 2 pi over 3. So let's go ahead and start here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So by the time I'm done, one wavelength, one turn around the unit circle, I should end up at 2 pi over 3. And then the four quarters, or the four quadrants, I'm going to be able to get these other three. So 2 pi divided by 2 pi over 3 divided by 4. Now remember, dividing by 4 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/4. Okay, so what happens, that simplifies out, and you end up with pi over 6. Okay, so I just divided the top and the bottom here by 2. So we have pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, and 4 pi over 6, which is 2 pi over 3. Nice. Lastly, let's go ahead and do a horizontal shift. Take this guy inside 3x minus pi over 2. Set that equal to 0. 3x, bring the pi over 2 to the right. You get positive pi over 2. Let's go ahead and divide by 3. Okay. Remember, dividing by 3 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/3. So we're going to move it pi over 6 to the right. Nice. Which is great because I have the same denominator, so I'll be able to move it fairly easily. Alright, now let's go ahead and start graphing. Now we start off with our midline. Our midline is at 3. 1, 2, 3 over here. Nice and easy, straight. Take your time, don't go too fast. I know you guys are smart. Alright, so now we're going to start at cosine. Remember, cosine does not start at the midline. Cosine starts at the amplitude. So when we do cosine, okay, where's the amplitude? The amplitude is 2. Okay, so we're not going to start here. We're going to start 2 above 1, 2. We're going to start right there. And then we follow the pattern. Amplitude, midline, amplitude. Remember, amplitude is from the midline. So we're going to count 2 steps down. 1, 2 right here. And then we're going to go back to the midline. And then we're going to go back up to the amplitude right here. Nice, right here. Nice little curve. Okay. Remember, always try to make it curved. Don't make it like a V shape, because it's not a V, it's actual curve. And remember, it does continue on this way, it does continue on that way. Alright? But this wave right here in the middle, that's called one cycle. Okay, one turn around the unit circle. Alright guys, now that I have that, okay, I have to shift it. Okay? So we're gonna shift it pi over 6 units to the to the right. So let me go ahead and extend this guy. 1, 2, 3. So if I count 1 pi over 6, 2, 3, 4 pi over 6, this guy's going to be 5 pi over 6. Okay, so everything's going to go ahead and move to the right. Why? Because this guy's positive. So this guy's actually going to be here. This guy's actually going to be there. This guy's going to be there. This guy over here. And this guy at 5 pi over 6. So we have a nice curve right here. Okay. Right here. Goes down. And I shifted it to the right. So now, the last thing I have to do, guys, is remember we're doing cosine, but they want secant. Secant, much like cosecant, okay, wherever I see this, where they cross the x-intercept here, okay, remember your new midline is representing the x-axis here. So we just elevated, we shifted it up. So this represents the x-axis. So right here we're going to have our asymptotes. And let me do it in red. These are going to be asymptotes. And again, if you don't know why they're asymptotes, go back to the previous videos and I explain why they're asymptotes. Okay, that way you have an understanding. All right, but right here where it crosses becomes a 0. Okay, so now we're gonna, this guy, you see this part right here, this red part, instead of being concave up, going up, it's actually gonna go what? Down. Whoops, down. And then this guy here, same thing. Instead of going down, it's actually going to go up. Same thing is going to go down. This guy's going to go up. Ooh, this is going to go up. Okay, so then this guy here, the solid black line, is your secant. So hopefully that helps, guys. The more you do, I see you guys are getting a lot better on these. Continue doing a great job and keep up the good work.